Come on, demons. Come on, come on, come on, come on, demons. I've got this feeling.
Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland Podcast. My name is Andy, and it's been 231 days since we last tasted defeat, and it's now been 20,429 days since we last started the season on 6 wins. The D's had just defeated the Pies at the MCG by 2 points, and has a man top the D's stat sheet with 17 disposals. It was 1965 and the Demons were the reigning premiers. Kevin Bartlett had played 4 of his 403 games. The Hawks had only won 1 flag. My Fair Lady won the Academy Award. The Beatles' Ticket to Ride was the #1 song on the charts. And Aussies were still using pounds, shillings and pence. Joining me tonight, a long-time Demonland poster, Bin Man. Good evening, Bin Man. How are you?
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Demonlanders. Up and about. I'm up and about this week. I've got the Melbourne socks on. I've got the Melbourne T-shirt on here in Shadow Bin Man. It's 6 and zip doesn't come around every decade, does it?
No, certainly
saying I'm pleased one of these records is actually before I was born. So that one is just before I was born. So it's a long time, 1965.
I was trying to include some any current day Demons players, coaches, officials, something in there. The only one that I think qualifies is Choco, was born in the, I think, the late 50s or something. But there was sort of no one sort of contemporary to include in there saying that this person was 3 months old or whatever. So
they were talking about the statistics about how difficult we are to score against. Again, as I said last week, I've immersed myself in media this week, so I'll be quoting from all sorts of different things and not accurately saying where they're from. But the last time we were this stingy in defence was 1965 at this part of the season. I'm thinking, well, geez, it's not such a good omen, is it? Things didn't go great after that point in time. So, 55 years later, here we are.
Well, if we keep winning, the things might go back to sort of in the early 60s or late 50s, and that's probably a better omen, particularly if we want to have a dynasty. But as is, we're going to take it 1 week at a time. But yeah, I've been immersing myself in all of it, soaking it all up. We want to take 1 week at a time. We want to keep the lid on it, but it's hard not to sort of live in the moment and sort of soak it up. I've had, mates, acquaintances, workmates who know how passionate I am about the Demons, and they're just all calling in, checking in, seeing how I'm doing, but this time for a positive reason rather than negative. So it's a good thing. But are we the real deal? I know it's still early days, and as I said, we're taking it 1 week at a time. But the media, as we've been watching all the shows, listening to all the shows as well, they're starting to jump on the bandwagon. For the most part, they're now discarding the "you can't trust Melbourne" tag, and I, for all my ingrained negativity, am certainly seeing a different Demon outfit to the one that I couldn't trust, for the last couple of years or decades. It has a different aroma to the Demon teams of the past that, would concede or would be unable to contain an avalanche of unanswered goals from the opposition. The Demon teams that couldn't perform on the big stage, barring the 2018 elimination and qualifying finals, or the Demon teams that wouldn't be able to reset from a slow start like on the weekend to then not only catch up but to dominate. And I guess the next thing that I want to see this team do is to crush an opposition, but let's take it 1 week at a time. That hopefully will come. So are we the real deal, or is it too early to tell?
I don't think it's too early to tell. I say this with a fair degree of confidence. We're absolutely the real deal. And as any Melbourne fan knows, I mean, you know what the real deal isn't, and we're experts in that, and that makes us experts in what the real deal is. And we've looked at the Essendons and the Brisbanes and the Lions, and more recently Richmond and the Hawthorn dynasty, and even the Cats. So I think that we've jealously looked on. We've got an understanding, probably more than most clubs, what the real deal is, and 100% we're the real deal. And there's been some excellent posts this week. Shout out to all the excellent posters in Demonland, and one caught my attention from Penance D, who lives nearby or next door to an ex-St Kilda player called George Young. And they were talking about the game, and Penance D posted that he was still sort of in a daze, that he's realising now that following a series of where he's following a serious team, and had a chat with his neighbour, George Young, who said, you don't win flags in April, but, we're a really good team and we're hard at the contest. We tackle with ferocity, defend well over the ground. This is what George Young was saying to Penance and D's. Penance D was saying he doesn't want to get ahead of himself, but George Young said, no, enjoy this. They're going to get better. They're tough, hungry, well organised, can play, have some real star quality. And the core are now at 100-plus games. I think that George Young has had a pretty decorated career, and at AFL, and I think at Waffle level as well. Played State of Origin football in the first one. So it's pretty good, that someone who knows his football and he's spot on. I think you couldn't describe it better. I think that point about us being 100 games, our core of players around that 100-game mark, and then you add in the younger players with excitement, is an excellent point. And so, the short answer, we're the real deal.
It was sort of hard to, not hard to celebrate, but, you didn't want to, I had some Richmond people sort of around me, you don't want to, there's nothing we can do to dig it into them, because they got the perfect answer for us with their 3 premierships in 4 years. But, it's hard not to get excited, but they sort of were quick to sort of put us back in our boxes and say what you said before about you don't win premierships in April. So I'm excited, but still a long way to go.
And not just on that, Andy, on that excitement, I think as evidence that we're the real deal is that, I'm not sure about you, but there was tremendous excitement in the stands, and Melbourne fans were up and about, obviously, just as we are. And but it felt like that it was a fairly contained excitement. And that seems to be the case with the players. One of the things that I was really impressed in the game is how, and you pick this up on the replay more, but how settled the players looked, and they weren't celebrating goals, going bananas. And even afterwards, even after the final siren, they were exhausted. It was a hugely, exhausting game of footy for them. I thought they seemed to take it in their stride, didn't get over, pumped. And the fans seem to take it that way as well. And, I guess for me, that's sort of evidence again that we're the real deal, because, maybe in previous years, a win like that would be a bookmark one that it was a fantastic win. But maybe we would have over celebrated and still be celebrating rather than looking forward.
Were you disappointed in the crowd? I was a little shocked when I saw 56,000. I know at the time that before the game, the next day, that was the biggest crowd this year for the AFL. But I was sort of expecting a lot more, definitely high 60s, maybe low 70s, particularly when they went to the 85% capacity. I thought I was a little disappointed with the end number, and I wonder if the weather kept people away or COVID still. That's, scepter of COVID hanging over maybe the older generation. Or were Richmond supporters staying away? I don't know.
I've said after the Freo game, I think it's a furphy. I mean, one of my favourite threads that come up now on Demonland are the what are they saying at Punt Road thread this week. I'm not sure what are they saying at Arden Street will be next week or is next week already, or Linton Street. And there was a quote from someone on Big Footy knocking the crowd, a Tigers fan knocking the crowd. It's like, geez, big deal. It's like,
well, he was he said that Melbourne supporters were staying away and that it was all Richmond. But I thought there were I don't know, maybe because they weren't in front later in the game, you didn't hear the roar. But I thought our roar was quite loud.
yeah, and a bit of a reality check. They've got 100,000, famously, they hang their hat on it. They've got 100,000 members. I mean, like the general admission was there for any number of, all of them could have gone if they wanted, just about. So, give me a spell. I mean, look, I think it's much ado about nothing, to be honest. I wouldn't have cared if there's 40,000. It was a fantastic atmosphere. It was actually really easy to get in. I had no dramas getting in and or out, for that matter. I thought it was well managed, had great seats that were just through general admission members tickets, better seats than I've ever had for that game in the past. So to be honest, I could care less what the crowd was.
I'll bank the win in front of no one.
Yeah.
So
Like Freo did against North at that same round.
Yeah. Let's talk about the game. Since I've got our master D-Milan strategist all to myself tonight, I'll get your thoughts on what happened in the opening 10 to 15 minutes of the game, that saw Richmond get the jump on us out of the box, where we found ourselves 15 points down, perhaps in line for a right royal spanking by the reigning premiers. I would normally ask you if you were as worried as I was at this stage, but I know that you, unlike me, are a glass half full Demon supporter. And I'm not going to lie, I was shitting myself. So what happened at the beginning? What did we do to right the ship and then, sort of go on and put our foot on their throat?
It's interesting because we had a similar discussion. I think it was the Giants game. I don't think we did anything different. And I think that sort of, again, speaks to being the real deal. Is it was pretty remarkable, some of the numbers. After 13 minutes, it was 11 inside 50s to 1. Ended up being, I think, 25 or something at the end of that quarter to 12 or some such number. But 11 to 1. But I don't think we did anything. We didn't make any tactical changes to arrest that momentum. We might talk a little bit later about, some of the adjustments we made to our game to stymie the way they like to play. But I think that we stuck to our game plan. And that's the whole thing about having a system that everyone has bought into. They just went back to the basics. I heard Track on 360 tonight talk about, they had a mark, they settled. I feel like in that first 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes of that game, we were a little bit nervous. We made a couple of errors that we haven't previously, a couple of fumbles. I think Rivers fumbled one and turned it over. And unusually, May got taken under the ball by my least favourite player in the league now, Lynch. And they got a goal out of the back. That's going to happen maybe 5 times more for the rest of the season. One of those goals was a complete one out of Rewald's bum. The goal that he kicked off the ground. We're well set up for that. But they definitely brought the pressure, didn't they? And they played that very much that Richmond game plan of getting it forward at all costs, forward half pressure. Trying to trap it in that forward half. I actually think that, and I said it during the game, the impressive thing about Melbourne was that they only scored 2-3 in that first 15 minutes. That was Goody said afterwards, is that they knew they were going to come at us at some point. It just happened to be in the first 5 or 6 minutes of the game, and they weathered that storm. And I think we've already talked about it, haven't we? That's been one of the key themes for this season, is how well the players in a quarter have responded to pressure. So for me, the key was that the back six held up. They only scored 2-3, and one of them was a complete lucky goal. It wasn't as if they were destroying us, and I think our ability to have the ball come at us in that back half and be confident that we can absorb pressure was terrific. And I thought the goal that we got, our first goal, really showed where we're at the moment as a team, how confident they are, because I'm thinking, I can't recall who crossed it. You might remember who crossed it into Nibbler, who sidestepped someone and went into the corridor. Initially Jackson marked it. So, marked it, and he went across and ended up in Salem's hand, who, was cool as ice to slot that from outside 50. And then we're away. So suddenly after 15 minutes of domination, they're only 9 points up. And so, if any other team had that level of pressure applied to them, they would have been 4 or 5 goals down at that point. And just as St Kilda were when they turned up the wick against the Saints the previous week. They put a space on them in 15 minutes, didn't they? They killed them. They ended up winning by 84 points in that match. So I think the answer is that we didn't do anything different. We absorbed the pressure. Our back six just stood up incredibly. And in fact, after that point, they struggled to score for the rest of the match.
Yeah, absolutely. But what's changed? There's a thread currently on Demoland asking, what's changed. Demoland posted, leave it to Diva, posed the question, why are so many players improving? Why have Salem, TMac, Lever, Track, A&B, Hunt, Spargo, Tomlinson and Gus gone to new levels and all together at the same time? It's a wonderful thing, but what's been the difference? And I was a little surprised you hadn't contributed to this thread. You're usually all over that type of analysis. So what's changed from the mindset? We've seen a lot of the footy shows and the players coming out and saying they're playing for each other as a team. Is that what it is? Is it just this changed mindset? Is it that they're matured? You mentioned before they've played a lot more games together now. We've got a lot of guys hitting that 100-game mark. What is it?
Yeah, part of the reason I hadn't looked in that thread is that sort of I was protecting myself from being frustrated. So I should actually have a look, and I might be wrong there. But I think it's incremental, and I might touch on it later. But my frustration with the media and the way they cover the game, particularly around the systems and the tactics, but. Unusually, there's some really excellent questions in both Goody's presser and Hardwick's presser this week. It seemed a voice I hadn't heard before, a young fella. And he made the point to Goodwin or in fact asked about, is this something new or is this from, it was last year, did this process start last year? And Goodwin agreed, said, yeah, that's right, it did. Despite leaving aside the horror of Cairns, that there were a lot of positives last year. A lot of this was building up. And, I would go back to, right back to 2017, 2018. And then even in 2019 with a horrible year, all of that is building towards where we are now. So what's changed, it sort of implies that suddenly a penny's dropped and there's been some magic bullet. And I just think that's a little bit sort of, it's a little bit black and white. It's changed over time incrementally. He's got buy-in, but if I was to say what are the key things, I'll ask you, Andy, what are the key words that players keep repeating when they're interviewed? Every player is repeating these key phrases. What are the words that you're hearing all the
time? I'm hearing stuff they're buying in of going back to stuff like they're playing the Melbourne brand of thing, but I don't know what in particular are you hearing?
Well, things like the words like trust, leadership, connectedness keeps getting mentioned. Like multiple players are saying connected. Selflessness comes up all the time, both our players when they're being interviewed and the media are making those comments. My question about why the keywords is that I've noticed with Richmond they repeat key phrases and they're obvious become maxims in the club and they become true through repetition almost the sort of Burgess repetition about you will be the fittest team in the league. But part of it is that it moves from sort of thinking about it to believing it, and we are just about the fittest in the league. But what's critical is that the players believe that. I think that for me, the key things is that selflessness, and it's been talked a bit about. Tomlinson mentioned specifically talked about the increased defensive pressure from Oliver this year, and I've really noticed that I talked about it at the beginning of the season that that's an area that he really has to lift to go up to that, really true elite level, and I think he has. He was awesome, his tackling on the weekend. I think the other thing that can't be underestimated is exactly the point that George Young made about having a core of players who have played 100 games of footy. It's not just physically able to stand up to the rigours of AFL footy. It's also maturity, isn't it? You get someone like Track who's gone up a level in both his ability, but as much as anything, his maturity. So you've got that young group who are now coming up together, and they're enjoying each other's company. Grapevine makes a great point about just how much they seem to love playing footy together. You showed that on I like the video on Demonland each week. You can put it on high rotation on my screensaver. The Track goal. And I was watching the replay today, the Track goal, first goal of the last quarter, I think it was. Afterwards, him and Oliver did a big jump in the air, chest bump.
Yeah, they do that a lot.
And they both just radiated happiness. And in the background, if you look at the replay, it's quite funny. In the background, Gorn sort of looking at them both with a wry grin on his face and a bit of a smile. But then directly afterwards, he says something to Oliver. And I'm presuming he said, look, head in the game now. This is not over. So in that moment, there's some of the things that have changed. You've got Oliver's just re-signed. Track surely is going to re-sign. You've got the leader who's stepping in just to say, look, this is no worries, fellas, but let's just keep a lid on it. We've still got a quarter to play. They're loving playing together. That's that connectedness thing. But I think it's that sort of maturity. It didn't happen overnight. This goes back to 2017 and the loss against Collingwood. All of those things, 2018 getting ahead of ourselves, 2019 dealing with all the injuries and and also
May, Lever.
Yeah, exactly. This is not a suddenly like a magic bullets happen. No, it's not Uze. He's probably played a huge role. It's not Williams. He's played a role, but it's McCartney and it's, Roos. This is why it takes so long to get to where to be the real deal, as we're talking about. You don't get to be a real deal overnight, as Carlton is discovering and Collingwood.
And St Kilda, because they thought they had, had one fantastic trade season where they brought in 5 sort of high profile for a trade, and look what's happened. The wheels have almost fallen off.
Well, exactly. I mean, Saints, the players they brought in are players to take them to a flag, aren't they? When you go to that level and you bring in like Hanbury and Brad Hill and Carlisle, and they used up a lot of their
right.
Yeah, I mean, so that's right. So they're a long way away, and just think last year they made the finals and they won their first final last year, didn't they?
Yeah.
And I go back to, Goodwin for all, I don't think he's the most engaging media performer. And so he's an easy target in some respects because of that. But I go back to those comments about right from the beginning of his tenure, he talked about wanting to build a side that played well in finals, not made finals, won finals, and over multiple years. And we're at the start of that period now, I think.
Let's hope so. Well, let's talk some individual efforts from the game. We'll start with the 3 Cs, Christians, Salem and Petracca and Clayton Oliver, and we'll start it off with Salem on the back of re-signing for a further 5 years. He's come out straight after signing. He's had yet another stellar game, probably unlucky not to be awarded the inaugural Checker Hughes medal. He's racked up 39 disposals, 6 contested, 80% efficiency, 7 marks, 9 intercepts. A lovely on-the-run goal from outside 50 that put us on the scoreboard, got things kick-started. He would have probably had another if TMac wasn't in the goal square later on in the game. Also, 8 rebound 50, 786 metres gained, and he really kept us in touch early on in the game. He was sensational. Probably amazing, one of the best first halves I've seen from a Melbourne, certainly from him, and definitely from a Melbourne player.
He was awesome, wasn't he? Did you know it was his career high possessions? What a night to do that! And they weren't, they often in the past, if Salem got up around the 30 mark, I think his previous high was 32. They said in the commentary. What do you get? How many possessions did you say you got?
39.
39. If he'd got 39 2 years ago, half of them would have been dinky little kicks, back and forward across the half-back line. But this year he's been such a more damaging player, and he was I thought he was the best player on the ground because Petracca played awesome, and we'll talk about him no doubt. But Salem was so important early on, right from that first goal that he kicked, and he set up that goal to TMac, I think, was it the last quarter? And he's just so cool under pressure. But now though his disposals are damaging. They're not 25-metre kicks sort of left and right, and like the sort of kicks that Mitchell get for Hawthorn, for instance. He was phenomenal, and he's got fit. He's got really strong. I said a few weeks ago he had a really horror run with his. I think it was a thyroid. Yeah, so that really disrupted at least 2 of his pre-seasons. But he's finally really fit, and he seems a sort of durable build, and another sort of leader. I mean, how many games has he played? You reckon?
Not off the top of my head.
It'd be up around 80, wouldn't it? 85 or something. So he's coming into that part of his career where he's no longer a young fella in that sense. He's a leader at the team, and they're using him in a really clever way, I think, in the way that that they use Caleb Daniels at the Dogs, and he's more than just a halfback flanker in terms of he's not just a defensive halfback flanker. He's a weapon, isn't he?
112 games, and yes, he is.
There you go.
Certainly a weapon. Was he stiff to not win the medal?
Yeah, I reckon. I'm hopeless at those at working out. That's why I never vote on Demonland, because I'm never sure who I think is the best. But I thought he was consistent right through every quarter, and went in that period when we did need someone to balance up. He was really cool under pressure in that first quarter. So yeah, I would have given it to him.
It's possible he did win it. The woman who was giving the award had no idea. I mean, she had one job. That still baffles me. I can't believe, someone, no offense to her, but if you were going out to do your only job for the night, you would think you would have asked just before, well, who am I giving this to?
Yeah. I'm not quite so. I'm a bit more forgiving. I felt for her.
I felt it absolutely. I felt for her, but I don't know who threw her under the bus by not whispering in her ear before she went out. So it could have been Christian, because I think maybe someone there said Christian, and she just said Petracca. So maybe the other Christian was left out. But we will talk about the other Christian, Petracca's having a breakout season from his 2020 breakout season. It just gets better and better. He's a bull in every contest. He often produces something out of nothing, and this was particularly evident with the second goal that we scored in the third quarter. Langdon's kick to him down on the far wing from where I was sitting and for where the TV. He had, fell short. He had Tiger players all around him. He bumps into Viney whilst attempting to pick up the ball cleanly off a wet deck. He somehow does. He's able to dish off a perfect handball with perfect vision to TMac, who gets it to Fritsch, and he kicks Trawley. Every week track stats include a heap of score involvements, and this week is no exception. He's been involved in 11 this week, 38 possessions, 17 contested, 10 clearances, 7 tackles, 720 metres gained. That one fantastic goal that you spoke about before just brought the house down. It was a complete performance, and we said Salem was unlucky not to get the Checker Hughes medal, but boy, if you're going to get snubbed, then, well, it's not really a snubbing by a game like the one Track had, particularly under the weight of pressure from the media in the lead up to the game, which, they're pitting him against a guy like Dusty, who's got a fantastic resume, as we know. So he had that pressure going in, but Track's just going from strength to strength.
And he's now arrived, hasn't he? He's like, with this body of work this season, he's really gone to that A grade. He's a Monty for All Australian. Oliver's a Monty for All Australian. Gawn's a Monty for All Australian. Salem will be pushing for All Australian with his work. You reckon that with the numbers that Langdon's picking up meters gained and just the way he plays, he must be a chance for All Australian as well. And you've got May and Lever, who at least will be pressing. They've got some pretty good players ahead of them, and Andrews in particular, I guess. But yeah, he just went beast mode, didn't he? And he's, I think I said it last week, they're all brilliant now across the league, but D's are particularly good at it, at releasing the ball when not getting pinged when they're tackled, like getting a handball or a kick. He's just next level at it. Like I'd love to see his stats on how few times he gets done for holding the ball or dropping the ball or whatever.
I noticed sort of what they do, and I don't know if this has always been done, because I think I probably got pinged for not doing this, but they hold their arms up and the ball out. They can't get their arms pinned, and I don't know if they've always been doing that or I'm just noticing it more now, but they don't often get tackled and are able to at least get a handball out.
They've been doing that for a few seasons. I reckon back to 2017, maybe we had one of the rugby coaches come down, and they've been doing that since, but they've really gone up a level. And I noticed Salem's been doing it really well for a couple of years, but Oliver's really good at it as well. His sort of first instinct is to go high when he's handballed, and they get it, but his track is just so strong that he'll get a kick on the ball. In fact, he did at one point where he forced it forward, where it looked like all the world he was going to have to release, get pinged. And I had a fella behind me, a Richmond fan, who the whole match, the first half of the match, he was ball, and we kept on getting the kick away. And at one point, I said, "Listen, you really have to understand the rules here. If they kick it or handball, that it can't be dropping the ball." He was pretty quiet in the second half, but.
Well, sometimes it's not dropping the ball when they actually drop it.
That's right.
So I can understand why he's confused.
Yeah.
But the one guy who doesn't sort of do that is Viney, and he just keeps the ball under his arm and just like the bullet.
But even him, I mean, he didn't get pinged. That'd be a really interesting stat to look at, how if you could get hold of such a stat. There's no doubt it's out there, but if it's all locked up under the monopolistic rules of the AFL, we just don't get pinged for holding the ball, and when we do, it's unfair. So,
I think we've got a plus 22 free kick differential this year, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah. Just before we move on to the next player, Andy, there's some good points in the chat room about what the differences and changes are this year. And Lazy makes a really good point that our ability to lock the ball in our forward 50 has been huge this year. And I totally agree. I think that's actually the biggest difference from last year in terms of our ability to score. I think we're number one in trapping it in our forward half. Richmond are number 3. We've taken that model from them and made it a key part of our game. But now we've got the players, not just the obvious ones, Nibbler and Cozzy and Spargo, who are awesome with their pressure and tackling. But it's that's the point about that all-team defensive pressure. You've got your mids tackling in there, and you've got your halfback flankers pushing up into the forward line to trap the ball in, and that's been massive for us. The teams are really struggling to get it out of our outside our 50 or even beyond the sort of wing. And I think that's definitely been a huge change for us.
If anyone who's in the chat room or listening live wants to give us a call, 03 9016 3666. That's 03 9016 3666. Give us a call. Well, you can discuss anything we've been talking about, or if you want to join the chat room, demonland.com/podcast, and join us in the chat. We'll make a good point and we'll read it out. We'll move on to the next C, Clayton Oliver. We'll just quickly go over him because we've got a lot of players we want to praise, but how can you ignore 36 possessions with 17 contested? It keeps him in the number one spot for total contested possessions for the year. He's 11 ahead of Rory Laird. He's averaging 16.5 contested possessions this year, which is mammoth. He's averaging 32.5 disposals, 14, and he's got 6.3 clearances, 5.3 tackles, his contested possessions is 14.2, which is a career high, and the 8.2 score involvements, it's fifth in the comp. Just gone up a level as well this year. The only criticism I have on his game is his set shot kicking. He missed a couple in the GWS game. He missed one that really would have loved him to nail after he got that free kick in the third or in the last. But it's not really a criticism, but I just love him to nail those set shots.
Yeah, and I think you make a really good point that he's gone up a level, and sort of going back to that question of what's changed is, again, it's incremental, but key things are we've got a really good team. We've got players who now are doing the defensive work, but we've got some stars in that team who have all gone up a level. Every single one of them. Viney is, I think he's a really solid player who's gone up a level, and he's pushing in A grade, particularly around pressure on the ball. Oliver was A grade, but he's moving up into that, up into the really high elite level. Track we've talked about. Gawn has gone up a level. Even TMac obviously has gone up about 6 levels. May, Lever, all of our best players have gone up a level. But I think that as a couple of people point out in the chat room, everyone's playing their role now. Why Little points that out, that it's sort of everyone's working hard. And I think what they often say about Richmond, it's that, it's the 12 to 22 players that make the difference between a really good team and a great team. And, it's all of those players that we talked about last week, the Spargos, the Fritters, the ones who are, maybe he's up in the top 10, I'm sure. But, everyone's bringing that effort. Everyone's playing their role. Everyone's, backing up week after week. When you get your best players who are already stars going up a level and doing all the right things defensively and all the team things, and you're getting those other players like Nibbler and moving up a level, then you become a serious footy team, don't you?
Yeah, you do. Let's talk about our defence, the three-headed dragon. I saw that description of our backline in one of the Sunday papers. I think it's a very apt description of our miserly defence. They continue to be the hardest team to score against. What was the stat? Went back to 1965. It's the best ever, 30% or something times that it comes in opposition score. And that's a record. I don't know, I guess that's in our favour. Having May back in the team just adds fire to that arsenal. Lever put his hand up for BOG honours in this game as well. His intercept marking was just superb. He spent 100% time on the ground, had 18 disposals, 11 contested, 7 marks, of which 6 were intercept marks and 4 were contested. Having May and Tomlinson doing the grunt work on the monster forwards have just allowed Lever to flourish. We've mentioned this in the past few weeks, to flourish in this role that, we paid a lot in terms of dollars and picks, and we're reaping the dividends big time for going hard at him. And, a lot of question marks on that move. It's paid off in spades.
Totally. And I mean, you mentioned all the big guns, and it's interesting. Quite a few commentators are now noting the importance of Tomlinson, and it was really evident, wasn't it? Because he played a fair chunk of time on Rewald. He was, I'm pretty sure, most of the game on Rewald, perhaps, and then that allowed
They sort of rotated a little bit around, but mostly
freed up, and May had Lynch and just smashed Lynch, except for the couple of times that Lynch got him underneath the ball. Allowing Lever just to be such a weapon. And I guess the other big change for us sort of statistically and game plan that's been evident this year is how much of our scoring comes from the half-back line, and how critical intercept marks are to that, and in particular Lever. And you could see it on the weekend, and it was really fascinating sitting up in the Ponsford looking down the ground at those two teams, the way they play. Richmond love to get it forward of the contest, and they're not really fussed how they get it forward. They'll back themselves in to win those one-on-one contests. The problem for them is that our defensive structure is so, and they kept on saying it in the commentary when I watched the replay the next day, is our setup behind the ball. It's always crowded, so they're not getting one-on-ones ahead of the ball. They're getting 2s and 3s on one, and I think there's a bit of a risk in just focusing on Tomlinson, Lever, and May. I think that whole system, and it's not just the back six; it's also the wingers. With Langdon and in particular Gus pushing back deep and helping out defensively.
Yeah, did you see? You would have watched on the couch.
I did, yeah. Yep.
That Gary Lyon played of both Langdon and Gus coming from the centre ball up and coming in behind, down the wing through 50 and down behind, sort of coming towards the behind the forwards, and that's just fantastic. And whoever's come up with that, kudos to them, because it's really helping us out defensively. And I guess you can't, guys like Rivers, the pressure acts that he does, it's not necessarily, I didn't notice it as much when I'm at the game, but when you watch the replay and you can see it up close, it's just some of the little things he does.
Yep.
The tackles, the second, third efforts are just fantastic.
Absolutely. And Artificial Wisdom points out that incredible spoil by Rivers that set up, I think it set up Hunt's goal, didn't it? Well, it wasn't Hunt's goal, it was Nibbler's in the end, but the incredible run down the ground by Hunt. And that basically iced the game. That was game over. And that was an incredible bit of play by Rivers. It was, he just launched at the ball, and his desperation. I mean, that's what, when I say that we weathered their storm, it wasn't just that we weathered their storm. From about 15-minute mark of the first quarter, one of the amazing things about watching that game is after that point, I never felt like we were going to lose the game of football, because it was like we just ratcheted up the pressure, kept on going. And in that second quarter, our pressure, and particularly our defensive pressure, was so full on that they cracked. I felt super confident at halftime. I just didn't feel like that we had the control, and I couldn't see how with our defensive unit they could get the control back. I just couldn't see that happening.
Quickly on Michael Hibbert, he sacrificed his own rebound and running game to take care of Dusty. And even before Dusty went off, I didn't even know that Dusty was playing, to tell you the truth. Just absolutely blanketed him.
Yeah, he was. And that was an interesting tactical move. And, kudos to Goody. There were a couple of things that were interesting in that game tactically. The use of handballs. So there was a bit of talk about how often we handballed, much more than we have normally. And one of the perspectives on that was that disrupts Richmond's. Richmond want you to get it forward, and then they'll eat you up on the pressure. But by handballing, it forces the defenders to run at you and to create space behind them, to stop, because they like to do exactly what we do, which is to rebound off half back flank and intercept. I think it's also got a bit to do with the pressure that they put on around the ball carrier, that Melbourne are much more focused on moving it, with some system forward. We're a forward half team, territory team as well, but, Richmond are happy just to get it forward under any conditions. So that was clever. And the other one was having Hibbert on putting him on Martin. And in the 360 vision, they showed Hibbert going up the field and getting back onto Martin. And it was obviously a clear role. And I thought he did a fantastic job on him, didn't he?
Yep, absolutely. Forward line, shout out to TMac. He's doing everything in his powers to keep that covered a big man spot in the forward line. He's got 2 boys at Casey that are kicking down the door, but 18 disposals, 10 contested, 5 marks, 3 contested, 2 incredibly important monster goals that increased our lead in the second quarter, and the third goal in the third quarter. T-Mac's not going anywhere.
Well, no, how could you drop him? I mean, I thought he was actually super important to that game, and his ability to get up the ground, but also convert. He kicked a goal. Both his goals that he kicked, what did he end up with, 3?
Yeah,
three. His first two goals were almost from the identical spot that he kicked one from Hawthorn against Hawthorn the previous week. And the first of those goals was super important in terms of cementing our dominance. And it was, it came after a really good play. So, they're the ones that you really want to reward the upfield work. And he's got such a neat action. But then to do it again off the second one was the free kick against in the back in the rucking contest from pretty much the same spot, and he went back and almost the identical kick with a slight sort of curve. And I thought he was terrific, and his body language, as I've mentioned a few times, was generally really good. He's marking really well, stretching up high and sort of taking it at its highest point. He looks super confident, and I reckon his pressure's been fantastic. And that, to be honest, is the concern I have for both Wiedemann and Brown, is that and particularly Wiedemann last year, his pressure was appalling last year, and Brown's not a noted forward half pressure player either. I think TMac is. I said last year, can you recall ever a player going backwards as much as he has? Well, now you could pretty much make a case for. Have you ever seen a player go that bad and come this good? He's been super important to where we're at the moment.
Sir Y. Little has said TMac, one mark grabs confidence, and those big arms up high, taking those one grabs, fantastic. Just a quick shout out to Bailey Fritsch on his unexpected early return to the side after only missing 1 week with a broken hand. He didn't. The stat sheet's not as glorious as some of the other players have highlighted, but he's done exactly what he's in the team to do, and that's kick a couple of snags a game and provide that medium-sized target. So just thought, give that.
And I thought that was the best defensive game I've seen him play. He was his defensive pressure was excellent, and he had a couple of excellent tackles. He had one where they got the free kick. It was a nonsense free kick because I thought it was the perfect tackle. He sort of rolled him to the side, and he put a player, sort of bounced him almost into the fence at one point, just launched it at a player on the wing, on the members' wing. I thought for a fellow who's coming back with a busted hand, his defensive pressure was just first class, and he kicked pretty well apart from that one miss, didn't he?
Yeah,
and he's got great hands as well.
Yeah, does.
The only negative for him was his coif was a bit sort of mucked up by the rain.
He's grown his hair long. That grew very quickly, so I'm not sure if he was wearing a wig or something. I thought he had a lot shorter hair, but this isn't Hair Corner. We're not here to talk about hairstyling. You talk about forward pressure. You can't go past our small forward brigade. When talking about our forward line, it's very important to talk about that pressure created by those smaller guys. Not only keep the ball in our forward half, but some of the other pressure that they apply around the ground. You often see them going sort of deep into defence, at least the half back line, and causing some pressure acts. Cozzy, Nibbler and Sparg have applied 5, 4 and 3 tackles respectively, but they've also created 21, 26 and 12 pressure acts respectively. My pressure, I had 2 pressure highlights. One was the tackle that Spargo applied on Hooley that started the turn of the tide that got us sort of going in that first. And the second was Nibbler's tackle in the third, I think it was, on Shane Edwards. It was just a fantastic tackle. You just love seeing the pressure that these guys apply. And if they aren't going to be hitting the scoreboard or racking up heaps of possessions, then you have to be turning up the blowtorch in terms of pressure. And we got that from all 3 this week. We hunted the Tigers, and that pressure forced errors. And you just love to see that we Richmond because that's what they're sort of noted to do. And then in the end, we did get some scoreboard pressure. Nibbler has 2 goals. One was an absolute monster from the boundary. It was a fantastic goal, and that goal from Cozzy, which could have been 2 goals as well. But yeah,
that was like all 3 players were awesome, and I think that a few people on Deanland pointed out that tackle from Hooley was a real game changer in terms of the momentum shift, wasn't it? I feel like it wasn't a sort of major momentum shift that just stopped them, but it was indicative of our pressure that just from that point just went up. Just went up minute by minute we were putting more pressure on them, and they, exactly as you say, we out tigered the Tigers. And I sort of made a note when I was watching the replays that it was like watching the hunters become the hunted. I know that sounds a bit cliched, but
exactly. It's a very apt description because that's what happened.
yeah, and it looked as if they just. There was some talk about whether their pressure dropped off, and I thought that was as high a pressure game as I can recall seeing outside of finals that we've played. Just about. I don't think their pressure dropped off, and I watched the second half today. I watched the last quarter. I'd watched the other 3 quarters, and I watched the last quarter today. We kept pressuring right to the final siren, and we were manic. And Spargo, it's not just the numbers of tackles he gets; he tackles and hurts. Like for a little fella, he really puts him in the ground. Viney similarly, obviously, he's just fantastic. And Nibbler doesn't get good numbers, but I just love him, and he's a player that just works super hard. And in some ways, I think sort of again it goes back to what's changed. You've got everyone playing their role. He's gone up a level, and he's kicking those goals from the boundary line. He split the middle too. So, and that really got us going as well.
It certainly did. And, my last but certainly not least, Luke Jackson, Saturday night was perhaps the best game he's played for the club. He showed us a glimpse of what the future of this club's going to look like. Look, every time his contract comes up, he's going to have Freo, West Coast sniffing around. We've got to lock this kid in. 18 possessions, 6 contested, 100% disposal efficiency, 5 marks, 8 score involvements, 12 hitouts, 5 tackles, 24 pressure acts from himself, and 2 goals, and all that from 86% game time. Lot to love about this kid.
He's one out of the box. I've said it a few times this season. He's, quite rightly, all the talks about Cozzy and he's special, but you watch, Jackson's going to be a total star of the game. He's in his, I think, 13th game, 14th game. His second year AFL footballer. The scary thing for Jackson is he's 4 or 5 years away from his peak, maybe 5 years, 24, 25 for a player of his size, is when he'll come into his own. That's sort of the age Maxi started hitting his straps. By then he'll already have 100 games under his belt. He is going to be like a total star, and we talked about it a lot last week, but the way they use him really frees up Max, and you could just see it was so, Richmond fans were frustrated with the ball zeroing in on Max. They couldn't find a way around it. What was one of the notable things with that setup was how hard that was for them to switch. I reckon they only switched, and used the width of the G no more than 2 or 3 times. And part of that is sort of the system that they've got in place. And Max is a big part of that. And Jackson's a big part of allowing Max to play that role. I thought that by far it was his best game. There's no question for that. And he was really influential at important times. He took in the wet, he took a couple of really strong marks, and he was a really influential player I think there was a sign there. I've seen it before, but I think he's a player who's going to be he's a difference maker. And he'll start kicking goals at some point or other. He's going to have a break when he gets his breakout game. It's going to be some sort of breakout game.
Yeah, he's starting to sort of clunk the marks as well, and even it was a wet game, so that's even more impressive for a big guy.
Just on the wet, I thought it was really interesting that you'd remember, Andy. I'm sure you were there at 2017. They said in the call that I found this amazing, actually, that the previous highest score that Richmond had come back from at being down at 3/4 time was 20 points in that game in 2017 against the D's, and that surprised me that it was only 3 and a bit goals is their biggest comeback. Bit of frustrating that it was against us.
Well, we had a lot of we had a lot of injuries. I think we had only one player on the bench maybe by the last quarter. We had lost our ruckman in Max that was already injured.
Yeah, didn't play, and I think it was Spencer was injured, and
got injured early in the game, and then we lost a few others, and it was just
But then the rain came at what changed that game was that the rain came at 3/4 time, and they just smashed us after that. Martin smashed us, and they were so much better than us in the rain. And I always completely sort of disagree with the notion that wet weather brings the bad team or a good team and a bad team closer. I think it's exactly the opposite, because the rain means your skills are at a higher premium, but particularly around pressure. The rain came in the second quarter, and that's when we just totally dominated from that point on. We kicked 7 goals in a row against them, which was easy to miss because they wasn't like it might have been in 2018 where you get on a run and you kick 4 or 5 really quick goals and everyone's going bananas. It was sort of they couldn't score and we were scoring every 3-4 minutes or whatever, 5-6 minutes. And we did that in the rain, and the commentators pointed out how well we were handling the ball, still handballing it around, still those little flicking handballs. Jackson, I thought, marked terrific in that stage, and that's when we won the game, and it was raining for a fair chunk of that second quarter. I just thought it was really interesting. I heard Gus talk in the post-match interview on MFC site with what's his name, Gibbo, and he mentioned that point that it used to be they were the rain team, but we thrived in it and we're really happy to play in it. So I thought that was really interesting. That basically we knocked them out of the park when it came.
Love to see it. All right. Well, anyone else you want to highlight before we move on?
I think there's right across the board, you have to sort of give kudos to everyone. I thought Melksham showed some pressure. He caused a couple of turnovers I think that's what we want to see. A couple of dump kicks that came back. One we got a goal from. Wasn't his best game, but I thought that it was good to see that tackling and that pressure. So I'll be really interested to see whether he keeps his spot. I thought Jones had his best game of the season.
How could we not talk about Jonesy in his 300th?
Yeah. So I thought, I really, as I flagged last week, I really disliked the talk about him being gifted that game. And ironically, on the back of that talk, I think he had his best game of the season. I think he had 16 possessions, didn't he? And his sort of physical strength was really important late in the game. He was still smashing in. I thought he was excellent, actually.
Well, where do you think his role is if he is going to stay in the team? He played a bit in the middle. I still think he might be a bit slow for the middle, perhaps with the rain, if that's going to sort of affect the speed. Maybe you can have him in there. But, I'd prefer to not see him in the middle. I think that's past him, but I don't know. What about you?
I think he's the classic utility player. And if you look at the time on ground, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, there's a core of players who are playing 60, 70%, and they come in and do a job. He's one of them. He's going to be important, I think. Physically, you need those players in the sort of heart of winter, and it's going to be a long season. It's one of the big talking points that people are now saying that, are the quarters too long? It makes me furious is probably overstating it. But, I mean, they've been that length for 150 years, haven't they, a game of footy? And you have one shorter season last year and suddenly it's like people are worried about a tsunami of injuries. We're physically making it through games. Touch wood, we've had a good run with injuries. But we're clearly standing up. But you need players like Jones who can physically stand up to 120 minutes of footy. So I think they'll continue using him the way he is, as a role player who plays between the arcs, half-back flank, takes some centre squares. I don't think he will take too many centre square bounces, but certainly stoppages, tackles. As I said, I thought, he had 3 tackles. He's often criticised on Demonland for not tackling enough. 3 is a pretty solid number. I thought he definitely had his best game. So you couldn't drop him off the back of that, because then it would make a lie of his selection. The other player I'd probably touch on Hunt and Jordan. I thought both of them were super important. James Jordan just keeps on racking up the numbers, and I thought he hit a bit of a flat spot 2-3 weeks back, but he's such an unobtrusive player. And he's a smart decision maker, doesn't waste too many balls, and the other player's Hunt. He's really got back to that 2018 form, hasn't he? And that run was just thrilling. And he was a mate of mine was saying he was screaming for the ball to get it back, and he did eventually get it back, and the one across to Nibbler. That's a fair run from deep in their their forward 50 to basically the forward pocket. So, he was terrific, I thought.
Yeah, that run and dash is fantastic. Still a few question marks on the disposal, but that pace out of defence to complement Langdon, you sometimes see them do a bit of 1-2 type of stuff, is just fantastic, and teams just can't keep up with them.
But he was 66. Disposal efficiency, which for him is gold standard. And
a couple of weeks ago was 33 before halftime or something.
Yeah, that's right. And just on Jordan, he's 83 for disposal efficiency. So, that's good numbers in the wet, isn't it?
You really notice Jordan, especially in the replay, and again, like Rivers, you notice some of those first, second, third efforts that he does. So
yeah,
love him.
The other player disposal efficiency is super important is Spargo. He was 83.3, and it's just so critical not to turn it over. As I've said, he doesn't try too much. He sort of stays within his wheelhouse, 40 metres, and doesn't waste his disposals. And in terms of keeping scoring chains going, that's really important.
Now, before we go on to previewing the next week's game, you did want to vent your frustration about the lack of tactical analysis and other useful analysis from the footy media. So take it away. What's your beef?
Yeah, look, I won't. I'll indulge me for a minute, Andy, and I'll promise I won't go
much time.
I won't go on too long, but a bit sort of self-conscious around. I'm really interested in the tactics, obviously, but I'm a hunt around. It feels like I'm a bowerbird looking for stats that I'm trying to contextualize. And it's because what I'm interested in is how I like to watch the game. But I just think our football media is just hopeless at sort of supporting that, or we like to sort of model our coverage of the game on how the Americans cover their sport. But I coach a bit of basketball. My son plays basketball, and up until this year, I've been pretty interested in basketball. You get more out of an NBA game in terms of knowledge of the game and the tactics and understanding it than you do in pretty much a whole season of On the Couch or those sorts of shows. And part of that's the media. It's just two issues for me. Part of it's the way it's covered, and it's full of ex-footballers. They're out of the game for 2 years, and their knowledge is hopeless because they don't keep up with the research. It's so evident. And the other part is how the stats are all locked up. Like the monopoly on stats just drives me insane. In the States, there's a million companies doing stats, but here for footy, I'd stand to be corrected, but the key one is Champion Data, and I think AFL have got a stake in Champion Data, and they lock up so much of the information, and then sort of gets out to the footy public in dribs and drabs, and a little bit here and a little bit there, never with a context, never with sort of any analysis about what it means, and then you hear in the post-match presser. So a positive is there is starting to be some good discussion. You had Leper on the clip last week, and I listened to him this week, and he was excellent. So, that's great. You can listen to the podcast. And Bartel had some really interesting things to say. And what's the ex-St Kilda player's name? Is it Montagna? He had some interesting things to say about, for instance, the handballing. But you've got to hunt around for that stuff. But the mainstream on the coverage, the coverage of the game where most people are watching it, it is so ridiculously shallow. And in the presser, I thought a positive was that young fella that I mentioned also asked the question about forward half pressure. I'd never even heard this stat. There's two stats about pressure, is pre-contest and post-contest. And he asked that question of both Goodwin and Hardwick. Goodwin gave the, basically straight bat, no information back. And I don't know why they don't, because all the coaches know the other teams inside out. They don't need to hide that information from the public, but that's the culture. But interestingly, Hardwick said where our most important stat is post pressure. And I listened to Lepage this morning, and he said that that's the key stat in football as a predictor of a premiership, which is post. He said it was something different, so I'm not sure which stat's correct. Post clearance possessions, differential, post clearance contested differentials. I'd never heard of these stats, and apparently they're critical about premiership success. It's just ridiculous. He noted that Melbourne are super high, and he was talking about them in the context that a positive for Collingwood is that they're eighth in the league at the moment. We're second or something, or first, and Tigers are third in that stat. And he says for him, and at Lions way back then, it was the stat that was the most important thing they were focused on. Why don't we know that? It's just so frustrating, and it would change the way people view the game, I think. So yeah, that's my beef.
Sounds like there's an opportunity for you to get involved and start something up.
Well, I just think that it's. I mean, yeah, but that, sure, there's bunches of people interested in it. Not everyone is, but it's really about. I think that it's about educating the fans and getting them sort of involved in that. Not everyone is, but in the States, fans know everything about gridiron, everything about NFL, everything about NBA, because they've got access to it, and it's discussed in a way that's educational and, helps people understand why things happen.
It's possible that because some of those games are so boring that they need to pad it with some more statistical analysis. Perhaps our game's more exciting. We've got a call on the line, I think. Good evening. You're on the air.
Hi, Andy and George. I apologise for interrupting.
Sorry, go ahead. You were just breaking up for 1 sec. So
apologise, George, for interrupting. So my name is Terry, and I'm from
you absolutely. The connection's breaking up. Do you want to try and give us a call back in a minute, and I'll pick up your call because it's breaking up. I'm not sure if it's your end or my end. So give us a call back. Sorry about that, B-Man, but that was breaking up. Not sure if that's on my end. Maybe I'll whack it off my Wi-Fi here, and when they call back, we'll take it. But yeah, that's statistical analysis. Yeah, that's interesting. Look, perhaps it's just perhaps it's a matter of education of the public, and giving out these statistics, and once we're educated about it, perhaps we can.
Well, stats are one thing, but it's also the analysis. And then on that, I watched the show that I hadn't watched it before, but the one with Lee Montagna, I think it's called Last Crack on Fox on the Sunday night, and King was talking about the number of handballs. Montagna had just talked about it was a tactical thing that the D's did to, as I said, to stop the to nullify how Richmond like to play and to force the defenders up at the contest. And that was a really clever tactical move by Melbourne, and that they would have been coached to do that, to make sure that, to handball, don't just dump kick it, basically. Don't dump kick it forward, because that's just playing into Richmond's hands. That's what they want you to do. Under pressure, dump kick it forward. So instead of doing that, handball. Hence why we had like 40 or 50 more handballs than we normally would. And I think the uncontested possession differential was way up there. And King was argued that was a fundamental change to our game plan, and that would fail under finals pressure, and that you shouldn't be mucking around with your game plan. And it was just incorrect. It wasn't a change to our game plan. It was a clever adaptation to our game plan to negate the sort of strength of our opposition. And that's exactly what Montagna came back and said. He said, well, no, it was just a subtle change to the game plan. It wasn't a fundamental change. So for me, someone like King, who's apparently an analyst, giving wrong sort of information. I think that's where you get sort of that's part of the problem.
Our caller is back.
Trying again. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. That sounds a little bit better, so go for it. Who am I talking to?
Yes. It was my fault because I had the web on as well as Skype, so forgive me. Okay, so I'm ringing from Belgium, and so I obviously didn't get to go to the game on Saturday night. So there's two things I wanted to ask you guys, having been at the game. One, I had heard that with the fracas with Cozzy towards the end, and I don't think you've talked about it yet, but with the fracas towards the end, I understand that Richmond have been really niggling him all day, which, you know, when you're just watching on the TV, you don't see any of that. I just wondered if either of you had observed that kind of beating up on him during the day, and that's basically where it got to. And I have a second question after you answer that one, if I may.
Yeah, sure. The one thing I did notice when I was watching the replay, I think I saw it at the time, he did get hit in the nuts at one stage. Perhaps it was in the first quarter. I think he'd taken the mark and he was having a kick from sort of right on the boundary on 50. B-Man, did you notice that? Or anything else in regards to them scraggling?
I noticed that incident because it was almost directly below where I was sitting. He absolutely was scragged all match, and that incident, I was actually really, again, King criticised him for reacting like that, and he pointed up at the scoreboard, which King was criticising. He's a young fella. I thought that. So the answer is yes, they were into him all game. But to be honest, Richmond were into our players all game, and they lost their discipline. That was a key factor in the game, I reckon. They lost their discipline. Were really did some stupid things, gave away 50. And the other really frustrating thing was the way Lynch plays and Rewald as well with a swinging arm whenever Max is sort of in the hole. It's just not on. So I loved his energy, and I really disliked the criticism that he copped for it. He's a kid. He's 18 years old, isn't he? And he'll get a lot of that treatment, but
absolutely
look after him.
I think he's going to get a lot of that treatment. They're going to try and put him off his game. They know that he's got a bit of a hot head and he might sort of react and obviously get some free kicks against him. And
they played a hard tag on him. I think it was, I forget his name, is Ruslan or something.
It started with a net.
Yeah, who's a young player for Richmond I don't think he's played more than a handful of games, and he was clearly tasked with putting Cozzy off his game. And he didn't have a huge game, I didn't think, but it was terrific that he kicked that goal, wasn't it? That he split the centre with it. And I'm not one for them getting fired up, but I love the fact that he went back to him after he kicked the goal.
Yeah, it was good. What's your other question?
The second one was, I don't know whether on the Demon website, whether you guys had a look at the Nathan Jones recognition, if you like. It started with his children, but it quickly went to on the couch. And so they had done a special 5-minute version of on the couch to just laud his achievements and so on. And I must say, you were talking about commentators before and thinking about sportsmanship. I was really disappointed with Nick Rewald. I mean, he was on the couch. He didn't say anything positive about Nathan Jones at all. And the only thing he said was when I think Jared Healy said, the best watched hats or best known tats, and all that Nick Rewald said was, well, yeah, but, Dusty is closing in on him. So, I mean, that lack of sportsmanship, I was really disappointed. I wondered if you guys had seen it and whether you have any reaction or not.
I didn't notice it, but now that you say that he didn't mention him, it is disappointing. He's a contemporary of Jones's. He played a good chunk of his career at the same time. It is disappointing, Big Man.
I didn't see that, but is they calling from Belgium?
Yes.
Do you get the Herald Sun in Belgium?
My sister has to send it from Melbourne.
She said it every day.
In their so-called salute to Jonesy, they called him a perennial loser.
Yes. I made mention of that on Demonland during the week. I was very, very disappointed in that,
that's
that title.
And raising the point about in the same article, or the back of that comment, was that, his win-loss ratio, which for me is, that should be lauded, not the fact that he was at a losing club, but that he's played 300 games at a losing club and not left. So a perennial loser, it's like that would be, Robbie Flower would have a record worse than Jones. Would you call him a perennial loser? A total disrespect. So
it is total disrespect, and the guy held up the team on his shoulders for so many years. He had all those achievements within the club, winning the 3 Blueies in a row. It's a total disrespect to label him that way.
Can I ask? So what was
about respect a couple of weeks ago? Sorry, I was just going to say, and I'll let you go. Max talked about gaining respect a couple of weeks ago, and I think they're well on the way.
Yeah, I think that's been a driving thing for them, that respect, and also that that notion, can people trust them? I think that's because that's again that sort of question, Andy, at the beginning about, well, what are the key words that have been said, and trust keeps coming up, and even we've asked, can we trust them? And and I think they're wanting to answer that for the fans. And so I didn't catch it. What was your name?
My name is Terence.
Terence. Where did you watch the game? I presume you watched it?
Yeah. I have an armchair membership through Melbourne, so it's on the Fox work. So I watched it at home by myself, but I didn't sit down all day, for the whole game, despite having a lounge and all stuff. So pacing up and down. But I mean, it was a terrific win as the whole, 6 weeks have been. I am a little nervous about North Melbourne. You're going to get on to the game and say, I'll let you go. So I'm a little bit nervous about that. I'll be really interested in hearing what your comments are. But give me a second to just get back into the website again before you get too deep.
Can I ask one last question? COVID notwithstanding, has he left? We lost him.
No, he's still there.
If we make the grand final, will you come back to Melbourne?
Well, there's a very, very good chance. I mean, this isn't the driving things, but it's my 70th birthday next month, actually just around the Carlton game. And my daughter is buying me a flight back to Melbourne. So if we get to the grand final, if I can get a ticket, then, certainly I'll be there.
Awesome.
And like a lot of other people. And by the way, just to finish off, it was terrific to see Barassi in the last few minutes of the televising of the game. I mean, he looks terrific. I'm really, really hoping for him.
Yeah, and speaking of disrespect, I don't know if it's disrespect, but there wasn't much focus on Barassi. Barassi's got an incredible history around the war, and his relationship with Melbourne and Norm Smith, and losing his father, I think, in the war, wasn't it? And Norm Smith basically becoming his father. So that wasn't discussed at all in the coverage that I picked up. And Melbourne's got an incredible history in terms of key people who have served or been impacted by war. So. I agree. It was great to see the footage of him, and he looks pretty well. I know he's had some health struggles, and but yeah, he keeps going to the games. He goes to most games, I think.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Good Man. I appreciate the time. Okay.
Thank you very much for the call. We do appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. There we go, Andy. Our first international caller.
I don't think so. I think one of our regulars at Demonland, I think, lives in Japan, and he'd give us a call once with Grapeviney early on in our tenure. I believe he was in Japan, but anyway, no, that's we love calls and we love international calls. And when I did see the area code when I took the call, I was a bit worried that we had every now and again I get a spam call through there, and I thought we'd be talking to a telemarketer for a minute, and I almost wasn't going to take the call because of it. But I thought, this could be fun. You could ask the telemarketer about the Ds.
Speaking of disrespect, the snow joke headline in the Herald Sun, who seemed to really think that was funny, but there was
that was the same article where they labelled Jim a perennial loser.
They doubled down there. There was quite a funny riposte to that in the Demonland, is that of course we're not. There's no one. We don't go domestic. we don't ski at this time of year. We ski we ski in Japan and Aspen in February.
I've never actually been to the snow, but I did say that I did once own a Range Rover, but not because of any Melbourne stereotype. It just happened to be the car that I was driving at the time. Okay, let's move on to so maybe some changes, but just quickly, the Casey game, the main takeaway from the Casey match is that Ben Brown has kicked 4 goals 2 and Sam Wiedemann 3 goals 1 in Casey's 59-point win over I guess they're the reigning premiers in Richmond, at least the last time there was a VFL competition. Majak Dawes had 32 hitouts, 7 marks. Jake Bowie, 26 disposals. Baker, 24 disposals. And those 3 were named amongst the best, as well as Ben Brown. So changes, do we make any changes to a winning lineup? I don't know can we be arrogant? Can we manage players? I don't even know if it's arrogant to manage players because clubs are doing it. Do we bring in another tall forward to see how the dynamic works? Or is there anyone else at Casey you want to have a look at? We've had a few guys sort of play the sub role and not get much of a go. Where are you at in terms of changes?
Just before I go to changes, on the Casey game, I watched it about 15 minutes all up. So I watched about sort of 5 or 6 minutes of the third quarter, about 5 or 6 minutes of the last quarter. It was hammering at one point. But I just want Bowie did, I think he got 17, 18 possessions, but he did a fantastic bit of play on the halfback flank.
And he's got 26 disposals.
26, I'm underselling the kid. He did a bit of play that just spoke to me about why they got him. It was on the halfback flank. It was wet. It was one of those situations that I talked about with Cozzy not going to a contest, allowing Gawn to go to it. So there was a one-on-one contest. He could have gone and made it a 2-on-1 contest. Instead, he elected to stand off the contest. He allowed his teammate to have the one-on-one who won the contest, was able to give it to him. And then he turned and just laced out a 25-metre kick. So, nothing brilliant except the fact he nailed the kick into the corridor. It went up the other end of the ground. The opposition didn't touch it. We had a shot on goal, which we should have kicked from about 40 metres out, but they kicked a point. But I thought in that, that bit of play is exactly why we've got him. And he will be probably in before the end of the season, but that's the role that Salem's currently got, that sort of half, the quarterback role that people talk about. But it was just such a classy bit of play. 1, the decision not to go to the contest, and then 2, to hit that target. Never missed, look like missing. So yeah, I think he's going to be a really terrific player for the D's. So and on changes, I think it's there's a sort of interesting discussion on Demon Land in that changes thread. And there's 2 schools of thought, it seems, that, now's the time to bring in some players, maybe someone like a Bowie, for instance. Definitely lots of talk about bringing Weed in, or, Brown probably even more so. I guess my perspective would be it's a really long season. We're only at game 6. As I mentioned before, injuries are taking a big toll on teams. We've done well so far. Injury management's going to be critical. Going forward, they're less likely. Their players less likely to get injured at Casey. It's still possible, of course, but it's not as intense. They can rest them if need be. Put reduced minutes on them. I could see them bringing Brown in, but personally, I would hope that they don't make any more than 1 or 2 changes, because for me, now's not the time to flirt with form. It's not. We're not in a position to suddenly, overestimate where we're at. We should beat North Melbourne, but if we look at the Swans are, we're unbeaten after 4 rounds. They're in the top 8. Carlton are competitive. They easily could have beaten, if it wasn't for a shocking second quarter, they could have beaten the Lions. They'll win their fair share of games. And even Adelaide's not going to be any walk in the park. And if we approach it, I think you send a funny message to both the opposition and your teammates if you think you're in a position where you can experiment or move players around or rest players. Sure, give some players like a Jordan who might need to chop out a bit of a break. But personally, I would hope that they just focus on winning these next 4 games, play their best team, whatever that looks like. If Brown is in that, sure, bring him in, but play the very best team that they can, get those 4. Because if we get to 10 zip at that point of the season, we're a lock for top 4. That's got to be the focus for me. We're not good enough, or we're not far enough down the track to be mucking around. The Dogs brought in 4 or 5, I think 4 unforced changes, and you could see how messy that game was. And part of that was the way Giants played, but part of it was also that you make that many changes and your system is a bit harder to do. So personally, I would hope that they make few changes, maybe Brown, but only if they think Brown is, that will help us win, basically.
I asked you before we started, we were just talking about the possibility of the game being relocated. We're not sure. I think a decision is going to be made tomorrow in terms of whether Tasmania, and it's, I think, wholly on the Tasmanian government's at their whim at the moment, that the game possibly could be relocated back to Melbourne, same time, except at Marvel Stadium, North Melbourne's home ground, is available on Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock. So it's likely that's where a game will be played. So does any changes that we make be affected by, I guess, where we play? You got either the wind the windswept grounds of Tasmania. It's not the same ground where we had that big win that year. I don't think, but outside, open to the elements. I'm not sure. Someone did say it was going to be quite nice anyway on Sunday. But if we do play under the dome, does that sort of affect who we'd pick?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that's again, it goes back to, at the risk of the cliche again, the system adapts to wherever we play. I think it's particularly well suited for the MCG and the spaces of the MCG. So I don't know the dimensions of that ground. That would be more my sort of thinking. But I wouldn't have thought it would make much difference to who they're picking. I mean, it didn't for instance, this week, did it? I mean, maybe that was a factor in not bringing in Wiedemann or Brown this week with the predicted rain. I thought it was a really excellent decision. I think it was more to do with going back to the lineup that had won us, the first 4 games. I think that was an indication of how highly they rate Frida, bringing him back in with a broken hand, and goes without saying May's importance, doesn't it? So no, I don't think that will make any difference to their team they select.
Just looking up the dimensions of Bellerive, which is Blundstone Arena, and of course this article. 175 long, 135 wide. I don't know if that is football ground dimensions in terms of the actual playing surface or the actual ground size in total. The MCG is 171, so I said Bellerive was 175, so it's longer. But the MCG is 146 wide, and that is 135 wide, so a lot narrower than the G.
So, yeah, no, I don't think it'll make any difference. I mean, I hope for Tassie fans and for people on the Demonland board like Nasher and others who are going down there that it's played in Tassie, to be honest. As much as I'd like another game in Melbourne, I think that, that would be a shame for all the Tassie fans to miss out, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Nasher is just hanging. He can't wait to get to the footy, see it live. So, yeah, I do feel for the Demonlanders and other Demon supporters who don't often get to see us, probably once a year, if they're like, well, it has been once a year the last few years because we always seem to get.
You didn't sound that sympathetic when you posted that bad luck that I'll get to go.
At the moment, I'm just being extremely selfish. I missed out on footy on last year, and I just want to soak it up every minute of it that I can. But no, I would like the Tasmanians to get to see us play. But yeah, anything in terms of, is this a danger game for us? My MFC SS, senses and my negativity, it's tingling badly. Losing to the winless bottom of the ladder team when we're undefeated at 6-0 is the most Melbourne thing that can happen. And I will concede that that's the old Melbourne and perhaps we're a new Melbourne. What insights can you give on our opposition? Have you seen much of North this year? I mean, they haven't been impressive, but what have you seen from them?
Not a hell of a lot. I've seen bits and pieces. There's no way we'll lose this game. I looked at the odds, and I reckon this would be the longest odds an opposition team has ever had against us. They're $15 to win this game. We're $1.02, so basically you can't get a bet on. Like $15. That's like at a 2-horse race.
Yeah, I know you like it. I know you like your betting. Would you put money on North, or is that just throwing money?
30. You might want to, because then you've got some insurance on your MFS. So I can't get my acronym right, but no, we won't lose it. I mean, but I think the critical thing is that that's a bit of the attitude. That's why I don't want to see many changes made. We're not, 6-zip, that's great. But I heard a stat, speaking of stats during the week, that, 2017, 2018, I think 2019, there's a history of teams starting with 5-zip or whatever and not getting past the prelim. I think we need to take every team seriously, but the Kangaroos are in a bit of a mess there. They've really gone back right to ground zero and rebuilding from scratch. So I think I said this in the Hawthorn game, we're now got a way of playing that basically, as long as we're not completely off like, say, West Coast were against Geelong, I just can't see that happening. Our defensive system means that teams are just going to struggle to score goals against us, even when we're not playing our best, like the Hawks did. And that if we keep our even sort of baseline pressure up, we'll crack most teams. I am concerned about the Carlton game. And I'm getting ahead, but Sydney too, they could elect to sort of play really aggressive. They'll struggle to score against us, but I think Carlton are a lot better team than what they're showing at the moment, and they've shown in patches that they're sort of top 8 competitive. And if we're off against a team like them and they're 100% on, then they'll beat us, and that goes for probably every club in the league, but with the exception of Kangaroos. I mean, I think I said this last week, we've had some luck this season. It continued on the weekend with Martin getting injured, so not being able to influence the game after three-quarter time, and apparently has sort of been carrying a bit of an ankle injury. But I think it's fantastic playing Kangaroos the next week, because even if we come down a little, a notch, we're still likely to beat them, whereas the Tigers come up against the Dogs next week. And the Tigers came off smashing St Kilda. So I thought at the time an 84-point win isn't really great preparation for a high-pressure game that they had against us. So, some things have gone pretty well for us. They also had, I think it was really critical for them to having Vlosten out. He really... without Vlosten and having that intercept marker, they look decidedly sort of shaky down back, and a strong defensive back half that intercepts and rebounds is their one wood really, or it's really a big part of their game plan. And I thought without Vlosten anchoring them down there, Grimes couldn't really play that sort of Tomlinson role. He had to be more, he played a more important role than he otherwise would if Vlosten was in the team, and I think they struggled with our bigs. So, I can't see us being beaten by the Kangaroos.
Well, just as you mentioned, all those things going wrong for Richmond, I'm shedding a tear for them. They can cry into those 3 premiership cups.
Yeah.
I'd take them in a second. There was something else I did want to talk about, but now it's gone out of my head.
While you're trying to recall that, artificial wisdom notes that it's also he's preaching to the choir. I'm preaching to the choir around my complaints about champion data. and that he's spoken to someone there about it, about the locking up the data, presumably, and that they claim they can't justify the cost if they release everything to the public, which completely, that just makes my head explode even, more so, because I mean, again, the AFL should be investing in that. This goes to the clubs. The clubs get all of this information, and then you hear about, for instance, the importance of forward half pressure. Well, I'm a paying member. How about give that information to me as part of my membership packet?
Or why not charge a subscription for people to
But what
access it?
cost? I mean, what cost? It's the clubs pay champion data, and all the clubs get all of the data about the other teams. That's what frustrates me. They all get it. So this whole sort of charade about not releasing information, which is part of footy culture, it's ridiculous, because the clubs know who's injured at another club. The club know, Melbourne knows every bit of data point about Richmond. Hence the sort of, the strategies around, for instance, not dump kicking. I mean, that's pretty obvious, but, there's any other number of bits of information, or any, huge amount of information that each club has about other club, including their own scouts and their own data analysts, and, just get it out to the public, and get sort of discussion happening about it.
Just even the AFL's stats site, like you can look up a player and get all the stats, but it's sort of it's how you access the data. You can't just access, well, not even raw data, but just you all you can do is put in a player's name. You can compare two players, but if you want sort of a list of the top 6, whatever of those stats, whether it's top 6 or top 10 defensive pressure, you can't find that information.
No, and also the problem is
standard ones like top possession, top this, top handballs, top thing, but those stats further down the list, you can't sort of get lists of that.
But again, they're just lists. That's just raw data. I mean, you've got to know, and I don't. That's the problem, and I want to know. And others do as well. Well, what does it mean? What does it mean in context? Like, what does it, what's the pressure meter? What's 200 mean? What makes up 200? They talk about it and don't explain it. It just makes no sense at all, and leads to people not really understanding the game that we invest so much time and money as well in,
Speaking about money, and I've just remembered what I wanted to ask you was Sportsbet have paid out the Demons winning the premiership. So in my book, we've won it. Cancel the season. That's it. Give us the cup. That's it. Did you have money on the D's winning the premiership this year with Sportsbet?
No, but instantly was frustrated that I didn't. They would have had to pay out about $300 probably. It's just they're having a laugh with that. That's just free ads,
Yeah, well, that's what my mate said. My mate sent me his ticket that he won. Just trying to pull it up. Yeah. So he's put on when the D's were at 21-1. He put this on after the Richmond the practice match that we beat them. He said he just did it as a laugh. He put $25 at $21, and he's won. It's been paid out $525 for that. And he reckons it's obviously it's just them. It's part of their marketing.
Of course, I bet you London to a brick if someone had put $1,000 on them, they weren't going to pay it out. So yeah, sports better. Yeah, they're speaking of monopolies. A good bit of advertising for them. It's interesting that, like, speaking of betting, is Luke Jackson, I reckon, is a good shot for, I don't know what odds he currently is, but for winning the Rising Star with Rao being out injured. So,
he has to get nominated first.
Yeah, that's true. But and this week the Crows player and Kajitsky, or whatever his name is, for the Hawks, both kicked 5 goals. So one of them will get nominated, but surely he'll get nominated at some point.
Is he eligible? He played games last year, and I know they can in their second year. It depends on how many games they've played.
Maybe he wouldn't be such good odds if he's not eligible. So.
A player is nominated for the award. There is to be eligible for nomination, the player must be age 20 or under, which he is, I believe, on the 1st of January that year. and have played 10 or fewer AFL games as of the start of the season. So how many games had he played last year is the question. That's where I'm going to go to AFL tables. All right, bear with me here. This is.
I could have just looked up the sports, but while you're doing that, just another thing that sort of caught my attention was, I'm not sure about you, Andy. It seems to me that the impact of the man on the mark rule has not been massive with opposition teams with us. And I was looking at some of the vision today, sort of trying to work out why. But we position a player often in the corridor who stands off the mark. And there are a couple of examples of it this round where they turn, they can't go. We put them towards the boundary. It's been advantageous to us for players like Hunt, who can take a few steps without that pressure, and Salem in particular, because those couple of steps, that's all he needs to have no pressure on him, and it just really makes his kicks more damaging, I think. So we've had some real advantages of it, but I think we've done a great job of basically making sure that other teams can't take advantage of it through clever positioning of a player off that, basically as sort of a second player on the mark, about sort of 10 metres inboard, always on the corridor side of the mark, forcing them the other way or over the top of the mark. And teams seem to have not been able to open us up. And again, we've got such good setup ahead of the ball that even if they do go fast, we've got, all of our players set up. They're just kicking to us and they're bouncing it straight back. So, again, I think kudos for Goodwin and I guess Uze as well, and Williams and whoever else is sort of involved in that. Chaplin, I think, is our defensive coach. Is that right?
Yes.
So he might play a role in that. Just sort of clever bits of thinking that, I guess they all add up, don't they, to that question that we asked at the top of the show about, what's changed. And there's probably the answers, lots of things have changed, maybe some bigger than others, but when they all add up, you get to the next level.
Luke Jackson played 6 games last year. He's played 6 this year. So he's well and truly eligible according to those numbers. Big man, thank you very much. Once again,
thanks, Andy. And I promise I won't vent again. That's my last venting about stats and analysis. And
I'm sure there'll be plenty of things to vent about this year. We can dare to dream, and always we're going to take one week at a time. But I was thinking about that. If we win the next 4 games, and we're 10-0, come up against the Bulldogs, how great would it be if they were 10-0?
Yeah. If we're 10-0 at that stage, we've got then 12 more games for the season. I reckon 15. If we're 10-0, our percentage will be 170 or something, which is incredible. It's 150.7 at the moment, isn't it? So if we win the next 4 games, it'll be up around 160, 165 perhaps, with 10 wins on the board. 12 games to go after that for us. 15 games with our percentage will get us top 4. So that means we'd only need to win 5 of the 12, and we're top 4. So that's why I think it's so important to get these next wins. And also psychologically, to have 10 wins on the board in a row. One, it's very rarely happens. So statistically, it's incredibly rare. But I think that for the team, for the club, for the fans, that's something that would be great for the whole, for the Melbourne Football Club. Plus, of course, it would set us up to be top 4, and you can't win a flag from outside top 4. The Bulldogs in 2016, notwithstanding, but
just ask the Bulldogs. But yeah, I was daring to dream and thinking, well, beat Bulldogs, and that's 11-0, and well, could we go the whole season, have 22-0, and then thinking, well, we're top 4. 2 finals gets us 24-0 into a grand final, and then I had that nightmare of losing, winning all those games and then losing the grand final,
right.
And that dream turned into a nightmare very quickly.
Yeah, I think you need help with that stuff. That's
I'd rather lose to North Melbourne this week and get it over and done with than go all the way and lose it. Too much pressure.
But then I think, though, again, the importance of winning 10, like injuries will happen. And so when they do, who knows what that means for where we're at, 3-4 key injuries, suddenly things look a bit different. And so, you make hay while the sun shines.
Absolutely. And no one can accuse us now of not having beaten anyone. So
still haven't beaten anyone above us, though, Andy.
No, we haven't. Neither of the Bulldogs.
No,
but now we have beaten 3 teams, I believe, in the that are in the current top 8.
And we've beaten both teams that played off for last year's premiership. So
exactly. Things are looking up. All right. Let's hope we're smiling next week, because it could be a disaster with a loss. But I'll hopefully have your confidence going into this game. But I am a little worried.
Put some money on the Dogs. That'd be great insurance.
On the Dogs or on
what am I saying? The Dogs, the Roos. I can't even bring myself to say it. Then you've got yourself covered.
I don't think any amount of money will cover the shame of losing and then having to front up on this podcast next week. So I don't know.
But
I'm sure there is a dollar.
The only other thing I'll say about that game is we don't need to smash them. We don't need to do that. Like, that's not, and it's not really our go anyway. But our percentage is impressive at this point. But I think that our game plan isn't really about sort of being able, like it was more in 2018, being able to get a burst of 4 or 5 goals, and it was super exciting to watch. But they were also equally kicking goals on us, the opposition, often in 4 or 5 goal bursts. That's not happening anymore. We're not scoring quickly. Oppositions are not scoring at all. And so that sort of combination means that you get sort of low scores against us, and our goals are sort of intermittent through the match rather than in burst. But at some point, if we keep this pressure up, we'll open a team up and really give them a hammering.
I would like to hammer a team. Just my personal. I'd like a game where I'm not sitting on the edge of my seat, biting my nails, and I just want to beat a team comfortably and enjoy it, soak it up. But yes, it's not important. We want to bank the 4 points, but it'd be nice to just enjoy the game. All right, thanks, B Man. We'll be back next week. I'll be doing the show from Canberra, so I'll be wearing a jacket and being nice and cozy.
I thought for sure you were going to say from the snow. But
no, I'm not going to the snow. Up in Canberra for the week. But back for the Swans game, which I'm looking forward to on the Friday night. All right, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Go Demons.
Go Red Legs.